Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining today's Accendo Reliability webinar. This is Fred Schenkelberg. And many of you that have seen my previous webinars over the last few years, or geez, 5 or 10 years or so, is I generally create a slide deck that has some theme to the images of one form or another, and they may or may not be obvious how they connect to the topic at hand. But so I'm going to move over to the next slide. And today I chose German Shepherds, or shepherds in general, and I have a series of images of them. And you may wonder why I have this furry dog as a theme for today's webinar. Years and years ago, when I worked at Hewlett Packard, geez, now it's over 25 years ago, the marketing department rolled out a new system for making slides and presentations, both internal and external to the company, so that we had this framework and a set of style guides and all this other stuff. Plus, it came with this great big image library that we could search on stuff for and look for things. And I was working in reliability engineering at the corporate level, and I regularly made presentations externally. And so I needed to see what images were in the approved file, basically, that I could use, and what could I do. And so I searched for reliability, just that term. And the only image that came up, there was one image only related to reliability, and that was a German Shepherd, much like this picture. And it made me think, why is this the face of reliability? And German Shepherds are known to be, very trainable and very loyal and very protective and all those things. And basically, it's that definition of reliability where it's you can depend on them. And so I have long remembered that and have used that analogy a handful of times over time. But when it comes to being a leader or even a manager in today's world, that ability to be counted on or trusted or believed in, those kinds of things really matter. And hopefully that connection, at least as vague as it is as I describe it, will become more clear as we go through the presentation. I'm not exactly sure where this phrase came from, but I heard it over and over all my life, is that in any kind of position, anywhere you work or anywhere you're, in charge, or you're in a team, or you're anywhere, there's a phrase that's stuck in my head for a long, long time. It's called lead, follow, or get out of the way. It's like one of the very worst managers I ever worked for, and it may have been the incentive for me to go on my own, although I would rank myself as the second worst manager. But this very poor manager, name I've long forgotten, and when and where I'll leave a secret, so it's harder to find that person. Yet they would, for example, I don't know if this would frustrate you or not, but I was planning to go to Rams. It was part of my professional development plan for the year. It was approved. All those kinds of things were all ready to go. Yet I needed my immediate manager's approval for the specific trip to, basically get approval to buy plane tickets and stuff like that. And I needed that before I bought the tickets. So a good month, 6 weeks prior, I went and asked, and they said, well, let me think about it. And said, what's to think about? I'm either going to go or not. And you already approved that I can go. And I have a paper I'm presenting. I have a tutorial I'm presenting. You've already approved all that stuff. What's to think about an airplane ticket? And let me think about it. And so I left and came back a couple of days later, a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. It was a week before the event, and it was still obvious he wasn't going to make a decision. So I just bought the tickets and went. And I put in my trip expenses and they got approved and no questions were asked. That it was infuriating that I had to spend so much time making a request that should have been a no-brainer. And Carl's talking about the Lee Iacocca's lead follow, get out of the way. I don't think that's where it came from. I've heard that from, a long, long time ago. Not before Lee Iacocca, but in that realm. But he may have made a difference with that phrase or that mentality. But the basic idea is that whether a leader or a manager is, we're going to run into obstructions, right? There's going to be people in the way, one form or another. And that brings up that whole concept, and it's probably going to be a whole different webinar on change management. If you've got an idea like, hey, let's make a reliable product, right? Versus what we're doing now. And here's some ideas to make an improvement. You will find that it doesn't matter what you recommend, there's going to be resistance. And if you say, let's rearrange the chairs in the conference room, there will most likely be resistance. It's amazing how humans really like stability, sameness, and everything else. And we have this inherent resistance to change. And so that's just one of the barriers that will be in our way. And part of being a leader, especially in the reliability world, is understanding those barriers and hurdles and so on, and maybe not be as rough around the edges or demanding or insensitive, all kinds of different ways to phrase it. But if we just shove people out of the way, then we're going to have built-in resistance, in coupling that with just the way we're acting and behaving towards individuals. So there's a bit of nuance in this whole process, especially when we're working as a reliability engineer or manager. So let's get into it a little bit. So how do you define manager versus leader? How would you separate the two? And I'm going to go into some detail on this a minute here, but the chat window is open. And if you have a couple of ideas, what characteristic would you say separates a manager from a leader? And I should say it can be the same person does both roles, but what character, what change, what's different between the two behaviors, say? Strategy. All right. I would agree that leaders tend to focus on strategy. Managers tend to focus on the tactics. Someone has to manage leader, and someone from the front with example who leads from the front. Proactive and reactive. Leaders proactive, managers are reactive. Leads from example instead of just commanding. Leaders focus on vision and so on. Thanks, Carl. All right, yeah, getting there. And it took me a little bit to really think through what I really meant, what are good definitions of these that really separate them. And you're getting at most of the ideas that I'm going to talk about here. So that's good. And the picture of this particular dog was randomly selected to represent the manager slide. So I think it was kind of fortuitous, but it's the implementation. It's who sits where, who gets hired, what's the pay raises. I've often lamented that many really good engineers get lost, is a loss to society as they become a manager. And some excel at it. They do a great job both with the engineering prowess and their ability to manage others and do that. But it's such a daunting task. I've seen so many people just get overwhelmed with all of the paperwork, all of the dealing with all the issues of payroll and benefits and where we were sitting and what projects we're working on and all kinds of stuff. And if you get too deep into the management side, you end up, in the worst cases, is one, make no decisions at all, but close second would be micromanage, that kind of stuff. But we do this as reliability engineers. We may be a titled manager. You might be the reliability manager for your organization. And you may have a group or a department or a function or something like that that you are in charge of managing. And I'm using air quotes, which means you get invited to staff meetings to figure out budgets and stuff like that. Right? Budgets are important and they have something to do with whether we can do our job or not. Yet it's not what technique are we going to use on this particular situation. Now, you may be running a lab and you may have, say, an accelerated test plan, and that you're going to execute that plan. You're going to get the samples together and do all that good stuff. And you might have a manager that's controlling the budget for whatever reliability testing you're doing. But it's more the tactical stuff and the HR stuff and the organizational budgeting stuff, both short-term and long-term and so on. And decisions would be like, yeah, Fred, you can go to this conference. Here's the approval for, you can buy plane tickets. And, do I show up on time? All those kinds of things. Whereas when I think of just a manager, it can be done by a person that's charismatic, that's empathetic, that understands other people, that understands the business dynamics, understands the budgeting cycle, understands the HR systems, all that good stuff. Could pretty much be a generic manager for any group whatsoever. But we often look to a manager, wherever we work, to have more skills than that, to more behave in some part, if not more so, as a leader. And it's somebody who, says, all right, here's an idea, or here's a vision, or here's a objective, and let's work together to make that happen. And here's why it's important. Here's what it'll make a difference on. Here's how beneficial it is to us and to our customers, and so on and so on. And some of you talked about strategy and stuff like that, leading from the front. Now, I find a really good manager is also a leader, is one that says, all right, we need to do this, this, and this, or we need to achieve this, this, and this in order to be successful. And the way they convey that is not just a command. It's not based on position power, but it's based on that. Carl, you'll probably look up this quote faster than I can remember it, but it's the definition of a great leader is that people do the right thing without having to be told. And I know I'm not getting the quote exactly right, but the idea is that in reliability engineering, we act as leaders more often than not. Is that we may be tasked with, well, we have a project we're working on, or a production line that we're working on, or a factory, or a set of assets, or a new invention for a new product in a startup. And we're looked to how good does it need to be so that it's good for our business and good for our customer, and how do we achieve that? And we might be the one asking those questions, and then going out and conceiving of the plan, figuring out what needs to be done, what are the steps, what are the areas that need to be achieved, and so on. And working with the teams on risk management and like FMEAs and stuff like that to figure out where the priorities are, where the weak spots are, doing halt testing to find out where the frail parts are, elements are. But we almost always work, even as an engineer, a reliability manager, we almost always work through influence. We rarely, and I've only seen this in a very, very few cases where the reliability folks had any real say, any veto power, say at a design review. Most of the time, we're influencers. We not the TikTok influencers. What I mean, people that work closely with the entire team to understand the pain points, the troubles, the areas of concern. We illustrate and highlight and advocate for the reliability aspects of it and why it's important compared to other goals. And we influence decisions. We provide information, we provide guidance, we provide all of those aspects of information and methods and processes and so on that enables other people to make good decisions, that moves towards the goal of creating a reliable product in the eyes of our customers. And there's an overlap with management because we still got to be able to manage the gathering and analysis of data, for example, or the conducting of tests or the operation of meetings or the facilitation of FMEA. We still got to send out the reminders and set up the conference room and all those other aspects of it. That's kind of management task type stuff. Yet if it's in line with and associated with it, the stepping towards a goal that is part of the vision within the organization, such that we make, say, reliable products for our customers that meet their needs. I always look at managers as the one of the budget that says, no, you can't have more samples. And the leader saying, given what we have, how do we move forward? And how do we define the improvement of what we're going for? Yeah. And Carl put up the iconic quote, and I agree with that. I should have thought of that earlier. Management's doing the right things. Leadership is doing management is doing things right. I think of that as the process. And leadership is doing the right things, and that's setting up the process, is the way I've interpreted that. But that's a basic definitions of leader and manager, what I'm using as my basis into this discussion. And I'm quite sure you've seen examples of either or mixtures of them that are both very, very effective or absolutely horrible. The real part I want to get across here, though, and even if you don't have manager in your title, you still need to manage stuff. Let's say you're a reliability engineer and charged with doing an accelerated life test. Well, there's a whole lot of management to all the bits and pieces of samples and monitoring equipment and chambers and what kind of equations we're going to use, what's the appropriate acceleration factor. There's a bit of engineering, but there's a whole lot of just organizing everything so that the test actually happens and the analysis actually happens. I remember one test I had to go figure out how to make good thermocouples. We didn't have enough around, but we had wire to make it and a technique to make it. And so I learned pretty quickly how to make them and then test them to make sure they were accurate enough and made correctly. So I could check the chambers I was using so that it had a uniform temperature profile across the entire chamber. And of course they didn't. And so it was one management step after another just to make sure that the test itself would be run efficiently or accurately. But what I often look at is, the CEO is responsible for what happens in the organization, and the board of directors to some extent, and the executive officers, often within an organizations, are the ones that can be called in front of Congress to testify or taken to court or so on. They can be held directly responsible or financially responsible in many cases for what happens or doesn't happen within their organization. And so they pay attention to stuff that can really get them in trouble. Insider trading would definitely get them in trouble. But they also don't shouldn't, I think is the right word, um, make claims that can't be substantiated. Whereas the authority can, and the responsibility cannot be delegated. The authority can. So, us in the reliability world may have the responsibility to produce a report or do some analysis and get it on time and those kinds of tasks. And we have some limited responsibility to make that happen. Yet we're probably not going to get sued for that. In the FEC or Federal Trade Commission and other organizations and regulatory bodies aren't going to come after us if it doesn't work or doesn't happen on time and so on. But we often can be delegated authority where we can be the one that's given the authority from somebody that's responsible for reliability to actually create a plan or do the testing and do all the activities that we do to create a reliable product. We may be given authority over a budget. We may be given authority over some tasks or ideas or concepts or charter to do something within an organization. Try not to confuse those, right? The authority versus responsibility. It's part of our role wherever we sit in within an organization, unless you're on the board or an executive, is to influence the people with responsibility to make better decisions. I'm going to drop the reliability decisions because I'm going to say it way too many times otherwise. But that's what I mean, is make informed decisions related to reliability and the performance of our products and systems. The other aspect to this is that managers are put into a position and they get some authority just by the position they're in. My boss could say, we don't have the budget or time or interest in this particular activity that you're doing, so don't do it anymore. And you should be working on this, this, and this. And some managers run their group that way. Oh, I got tabbed one time. I was an R&D group and working on statistical type stuff for the products we're working on. And my director at that time, a couple levels above me, came in and said, hey, you've got some statistics background. How about you do this test or set up and design a test to figure out if this product's going to last for 20 years or not? And it's a heating cable that we're going to bury in concrete. I knew nothing about accelerated testing, but he thought I could pick up that and figure it out. So I was, by that position of my director, said, all right, you're finishing up this. That's great. You got a few other tasks to do, but now I want you to work on this. And my boss never mentioned it one way or the other. My direct line manager or R&D manager, we were pretty autonomous within the group. We could work on all kinds of different things at our own discretion. It was a really nice R&D group. But my director said, no, we want you to work on this. It's really important for this customer and so on and so on. And he gave me some assistance and ideas along the way, but I don't think he really knew accelerated testing either. But his positional power and over time, my respect for him as a leader, which he earned by his behaviors and activities and so on, I'd follow him all over the place. He ended up being a really pivotal person in my career. But the idea is he didn't need to be well respected, given his position, to tell me what to go work on. He could just do it. And we don't often get that. We can't walk up to a reliability engineer or an electrical engineer and say, hey, you need to do a complete analysis of all of your derating of all the components you selected. He might look at us and tell us to go take a hike. Yet, if he understands why it's important, how it makes a difference, how it serves them in the long run, so they don't have to redesign the board or find new suppliers, if we've earned that trust or earned that authority in their mind, then they'll follow that advice. independent of our position in the organization. All right. Same with senior managers. If we're saying, hey, look, and this is a true story, in 1980, our percent of warranty versus our net revenue was about 4% at Hewlett Packard. And this was before my time. Dick Moss and team and the CEO said, hey, we need to reduce our warranty. And they did a concerted effort and they got it down to, I think, 1.5%, around 89, 90. I joined the organization a couple of years later, and I was looking around at where is the cost of stuff not working. And it was before companies had to report warranty accruals and warranty spent for the Federal Trade FTC reporting. And it wasn't obvious within the organization how much we were spending on warranty because the reduction program was so successful, it wasn't a priority anymore. And so the reporting of it all broke up, all of the focus on it broke up, and so on. So 5 years later, we finally got a reasonable estimate of how much we're spending on warranty across the corporation, and it was back up to 4%. And so I used that V chart, is what it ended up being called, and sent it around to a handful of folks to make the point. We can't ignore this. It just goes bad again. And 4% of a large number is a likewise large number. And so we use that quick analysis basically to earn a whole lot of authority for our group, because we were able to identify and articulate a significant problem with a lot of money at stake to go do stuff. But we use that to shape decisions. But the people that we were trying to influence, by and large, were managers and some senior engineers and so on, so more the fellow type engineers, the ones that influence major decisions. But they were the decision makers. And so we were working, and I was a first level engineer working to influence decision makers to make good, solid decisions about everything from how bonuses were allocated based on reliability performance to doing derating. And so we earned a whole lot of cred by doing a good job and being very consistent about it. And so it got to the point where people really did start listening to us. So much so that our phone started ringing off the hook because so many people wanted our advice of how to improve their products and programs, which wasn't a bad problem to have at the time. All right. So what do we do as reliability professionals? When I was back at HP, I was working on a inkjet printer, and I was the only engineer, not manager, sitting at the conference table for the project team. And there was a very senior person that was the designated project manager, lots of experience, lots of credibility, lots of respect within the overall organization. And they had a huge budget, and I think there was 200 people altogether under their command, basically. And he had a reliability, or it was me and him. We were individuals, but he was the lead manager, basically. But he also had electrical engineering manager, software manager, hardware manager. I think there was a marketing manager. The rest of the table was filled with managers that had 20 to 50 people each working for them. And so after a couple of these meetings and really not knowing why I was there, I sat down with the program manager, says, why am I in this meeting? It seems like I'm out of my league. There's a whole pile of experience and managers here that are doing all this stuff. And he goes, you're the only person beside myself that has to work with all these people. He's like, You, in your role, work with finance, you work with suppliers, you work with field service stuff, you work with the hardware, software, and mechanical folks. You're a bridge across all of these things to make things happen. He says, I'm looking at it from the overall budget and priorities and time schedule and all that good stuff. You handle all of those things that slip through the cracks and create a product that doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, I felt pretty good. But in order just to gather data in an organization, sometimes you got to go find it, and it might be in marketing, it might be in finance, it might be in warranty returns, it might be in a FA lab somewhere distant, it may be in third-party repair centers. And we need to be versed in how to find them, how to get a hold of that information, and then do something with it so that it's useful back to those organizations, plus the people we're trying to influence. The idea is that we have a very broad scope of what we do. Sphere of influence, I would imagine, is a better term for it. And in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve, it's appropriate that we get to work with so many diverse people. And hopefully that's your experience in reliability work. If you're only allowed to talk to this one particular team, I think you're being undervalued for what kind of influence you could wield if you had access to other teams and parts of the organization. So you could see the influence of a poor field service activity on how good the field data coming back to you is. If they're really top notch and understand where and how this data is used to improve the product, then we all benefit from it. But there's very few people that are looking at optimizing at the overall system level versus optimizing within your particular domain. So I've run into too many call centers that get them on and off the phone as fast as you can, so we don't have to have as many operators answering the phone, independent of whether they make anything right or better or improve the conditions of the customers. I think you understand my example there. But the idea is that we often are working between groups to find solutions to reliability risks, or we're setting priorities across different parts of the organization, mechanical, electrical, software, say all attend a system level FMEA. And if it's done well, the two groups that don't get priorities understand why and support it. Whereas a manager just says, oh, we need to work on software, and in engineering, mechanical, electrical, you don't get as much funding, without it really leading that decision, it creates a lot of animosity and in some cases infighting for resources. Now back to this authority responsibility piece of this. The real gist of this is we have to be trusted in order to influence well. And we may have an authority to do Weibull analysis, for example. And if we just create the Weibull analysis to send a memo out or send an email out or put it on a Slack channel or put it in a common depository and not really help anybody else use that information, we're going to be known as that guy over there that does Weibull analysis, and we're not really sure why. And when layoffs come around, that's probably not a good reputation to have. Whereas if you are taking that authority and influencing the decisions across your organization, and that comes with teaching and mentoring and coaching and explaining why and how this is useful and why and how it helps you make better decisions and where the information comes from, why this is beneficial for you and whatever role you're in, and so on and so on, then it can be extremely valuable to your organization and to your customers as they achieve the reliability goals. Now, in that simple explanation, there's goals, there's a vision of what needs to be done, there's the building of trust through serving other people, and then there's influencing decisions so that we get better outcomes. And all of that doesn't just happen because you were just assigned to be the reliability engineer. It happens because of change management skills and your ability to work, play well with others is the way I'd phrase it. But also understand and be empathetic as to what do they need in order to make better decisions? What are the things that keep them up at night? What are the elements that are most troublesome, whether it's an electrical engineering design or a software design? Where's the difficult parts? Where's the likely areas of failure? And what are the high risk areas? And then what can be done about those? Those are all fair questions for us to be asking, as it helps them actually solve their problems. And if we can bring some resources to it, or insights, or testing prowess, or analysis paralysis, analysis to it of how it affects the overall system reliability, then we can really start to build that trust, and our authority grows. Our ability to make influences and achieve goals, our leadership builds, and independent of where we sit in the organization. And I know this personally, and I've seen many examples of it, where somebody that takes their role as building trust and acting on it with a clear vision of what they're trying to achieve. Usually it's related to, in our field, without too much guessing why, is to make a good, reliable product for our company and customers. We can be very, very successful and very valuable to the organization. I've seen people that when I ask them, what do you do as a reliability engineer? They do just one thing. They're a cog in the wheel, and they're not really sure why they're doing it. They put it over there and somebody else deals with it, or ignores it, or whatever. They're just doing their job. And some people, that's what they want to do. They're comfortable with that. And in some of these things, I wouldn't say predictions are all that useful. I'd use a set of dice instead. It's a lot quicker. But analyzing field data, for example, we've got tons of data coming in. Nowadays, you should create an AI agent to do a lot of the analysis for you. That might be a clever way to reduce some of the overload there. Yet, when I run into people that are doing lots of Weibull plots, for example, and then we're looking at those plots and we're like, what does that mean? Where'd this data come from? Or why does that look like it the way it does? And they had no idea. They were just charged with open up the software, dump in these numbers, get a plot out, label it, send it over here, format it into a report. And I thought, what a waste of skill and talent and time and interest and so on. And they were just cranking these things out. And it seemed like a wasted position to me. Whereas others are actively saying, hey, what's the objective here? What are we trying to achieve? What's our vision in the organization and for this project? And then how do we get there? What's holding us back? How can we overcome those? What are our strengths? How can we build on that? And then what's the sequence? What's the plan to actually get us there? What is the systemic things that need to be in place? And what assets do we need to have in place to make this work? And then even better, I've run into folks, and this is more rare, where they are the coach or advisor across the organization to help them understand and make better decisions related to reliability. So there's a good number of different ways that separates us from being just an engineer and cranking out a design for a circuit board, no offense to electrical engineers, or somebody that actually influences the overall outcome of that effort to design that circuit board. Yeah, Randall, I agree. There's true leaders, doesn't matter where you are in the organization. And there's a certification out of Reliability Web. No, it's they have a professional organization. They changed their name a couple of times. So I don't remember what it is, but they had a certified reliability leader, CRL. And the F thing is that if you're a technician in an organization or a senior manager, it's different being a leader related to reliability than it is just being in your position. And of course, they can blend. And I think it makes you a better manager if you're a good leader, and vice versa. If you need to do the basics and understand how to be a manager in order to be a good leader. It's one thing to say, hey, let's make a reliable product, but not be able to organize any of your resources to make it happen. That's a problem with, in the management side. But we often get focused on specific tasks, like an accelerated life test. You know, it might be your specialty, your depth of expertise, and that's great. You can focus on it and make a difference with the results of that, but you also understand the broad implications of it, how it fits into decision making, and a handful of people that really need that information, so that you get the accelerated test designed and executed so that it actually helps them make a better decision. Now, you might not get the results they wanted. That's, I don't think that's ethical to create a test that only gives you results you want. I think it's a classic waste of time. Just if you're not going to use the results of, say, a test that's pivotal to, will this product last 20 years or not, why do the test? So if you're going to ship anyway, don't bother doing anything, just ship it. If you want a reliable product, there are going to be key decisions in that part, and the leaders in reliability figure out what are those key decisions, what information would help them make a better decision. So in the example where my director introduced me to accelerated testing, he said, we have a customer that won't buy this product unless we can prove that it'll last for 20 years. And so a deep dive into polymers and oxidation rates and how our product would fail from a chemistry point of view, and figuring out that it was not linear. And so a classic Weibull analysis or degradation analysis wouldn't work. Ended up solving that problem and creating a test that convincingly conveyed that this product would last for 20 years plus, quite a bit longer actually, for their application. And they were very willing to buy the product at that point based on that information. So I got a weekend in the mountains, I think it was near Tahoe, as a bonus for helping land that project or that customer. And it was only because my boss said, hey, you know some statistics, which are famous last words, I guess. So what do you want to do? Most of us tend to like to improve reliability performance. But if we're a manager, and not just a reliability manager, but any manager within the organization, is that if we just throw it in a chamber and put some stress on it, heat it up a little bit, or run even a very sophisticated set of environmental tests or whatever in a pass-fail kind of realm, yeah, whatever. Do we need that information? Is it relevant for our decisions that we need to make? Does it help us understand areas of highest uncertainty or highest risk? For that example I've been using throughout, is that will our product last for 20 years? We'd never evaluated a product to last that long prior, because most of our higher end products were used in oil and gas processing systems to keep certain pipes and so on at a particular temperature. And those were usually totally refurbished every 5 years or so. And in some factories, it was replacing steam. And those were often replaced and refurbished or reconfigured as the plant got updated and changed. So it was 5-10 years was the most that we intended to find our customers using our product. Well, here's one that wanted 20 years. And so in order to influence that decision, doing what we always had done that was only good for 5 or 10 years of evidence that it lasted that long wasn't going to be good enough. And so if I did what we typically did to qualify a product, the customer said, how does that show that it lasts 20 years? And so understanding the question, understanding the pain points, understanding the significant risks, all of those elements as a manager, because of the visibility through an organization, depending on where you sit, gives you insights that helps you understand what needs to be focused on. And from there, you become a leader. We need to understand this. We need to understand the resources and techniques and capabilities in our team, part manager, in order to achieve this goal. Understanding, will it last 20 years, for example? That's a leader. And the idea is that it's not just for yourself. It's not just for you and your team, so you can stay in business as your group or team or effort, or whatever it is, and still have a budget. It's by getting people outside your organization, outside your particular team that you're managing, to really understand the benefits of the work you're doing. So, for example, in my group, I was running this accelerated life test to help a customer understand if it would work or not. There were no guarantees that the results of the test would show that it worked that long or not. We just really didn't know. Yet it enabled the effort of that work, good or bad, when done well, would influence that decision. That was the charter. And the idea is that the focus on how does your customers, internal to the organization, the people you work with, the teams that make decisions, individuals that make decisions, what information and what quality level and timeline and so on are essential for them to be successful. And the more we can do that, the more that we're leading a path towards achieving the reliability performance that's in our vision or in our objectives or goals. So managers have a role. Part of it is to be a little bit more like a leader, but part of it is to use the information at your disposal in the bigger picture of things to understand where the risks are and where you can make the biggest difference. Now, if you're a leader, you already have some trust and credibility within your organization. What can you do to improve reliability performance? And again, it's what's the big picture? Even as a reliability engineer, if you're going to propose some activity that you want, say, a development team to do, what difference does it make? Right? The classic simple example is that, if we are able to spend a little bit more money on this and this and this component per unit we ship, our failure rate will go down by a larger number per unit we ship. And then times the number of units we ship times the cost of warranty claims is how much money we can save. And sometimes it's more complicated than that. I think one of our best allies, and I'd say co-conspirator in some cases, is to find a colleague in the finance group that can help you think through how to articulate the benefit of some proposal you're making. If the people you're talking to talk about pennies on shifts in the stock price or efforts in market share, that was always well beyond my scope and understanding of exactly how to do that. Short of going off to get an MBA and 20 years of experience, I go find somebody that had an MBA and 20 years of experience that understood the organization and how people at the executive level made decisions. and explain what I'm trying to do and how do I communicate this effectively, and learn a lot from the finance folks and sometimes marketing folks in order to be able to speak their language of the people I'm trying to influence. And so part of it was understanding that what motivates a technician on the shop floor is a whole lot different than what motivates a director, board of directors member, and what benefits and motivations and objectives they're trying to achieve could be completely different. More importantly, is their language will be completely different. And so one size doesn't work for everybody. So as a leader, and this goes into change management again, is really understand what's in it for them and be able to articulate that very clearly in a way that they can understand it. And be flexible enough when you walk into a room with three people and each of them have a different set of priorities, but you need all three to approve some activity or action or proposal you're making. One might want time to market, one might want cost reduction, another one might want customer satisfaction. How does reducing the failure rate of your product meet all three of those targets or ways of creating value? So understanding how your ideas and proposals and visions actually translate into different sets of value and be able to articulate those very clearly. And you'll find an ebook on Ascendo called Finding Value that gives a sketch of how to think through some of these ways of doing it. The other thing I see is, if you're a leader, is spend more time congratulating and enabling and helping others be successful than yourself. It's a great way to lose your credibility if you only celebrate yourself, take credit for everything. And I think we've all run into people that do this. And hopefully it's none of the, and I suspect nobody in the crowd around Ascendo Reliability would do this, but it's something to be cautious of. If you can hand off information to somebody else, makes a great decision that really saves the organization a bunch of money or future failure rate or whatever, is make it celebrate that, promote it, use it as a success story of how so and so did this and this and this, and it saved us $18 billion, something like that. But the idea is that the leader may be in the front saying, hey, let's go this way. But when you get there, it's because of the effort of everybody with you. It's not because of you. And I think that cements your credibility. And it's a way to expand your influence, because now the more people that want to follow your lead and take leadership on their own to promote reliability improvements, whatever their role is in the organization, the more likely you're going to be successful on one project after another. And many leaders, myself included, need to be better at managing. You can't do it all yourself. There's no way. And so getting the rest of your organization to pick up and do and think about reliability engineering type activities and tasks and just build it into their day-to-day routine, the easier it is for that organization to actually achieve the objectives related to reliability. My favorite role is as a mentor. And you can do this being very young, and you can do this with whatever skills and talent you have. Very early on, that very first project in reliability was accelerated life testing. A short while later, I was working in another role, and they hired me because of accelerated life testing experience. And even though I'd only been in the organization a few months, I was the mentor for accelerated life testing. Another time, I got asked a question about ceramic capacitors and can they if they don't explode, can they get really hot? And I figured it out. Worked with a bunch of really brilliant people to help me sort it out and articulate it, and did a webinar on it. And then within 2 months, I was considered the capacitor expert across the organization. It proved to me that it only takes about 2 weeks of concentrated effort to become an expert in something, which is kind of odd to me, but it it ended up giving me a whole lot of credibility within the organization because people knew to call me to get an answer, especially about capacitors or accelerated life testing. And I don't know why. A lot of people knew a lot more about capacitors than I ever did. Yet when it came to reliability of them, I was the go-to person. And so I spent a whole lot of time teaching other people everything I knew about capacitors and enabling a whole raft of people to take on that expertise role within their organization or broader if they wanted to. Yeah, there's no I in team. You're coming up with all the good ones, Carl. But the idea is that as a mentor, you get to work with individuals or a small team. And I like to think of it as a role of being the invisible hand. It's not being a consultant that comes in and says, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do reliable analysis, this, that, and the other thing, and this is how you do it. And when I leave, they don't know how to do it. Or they're not believed. They don't have the credibility within their organization that they know what they're doing because I was doing it as a consultant. One project I had is they asked me to be the invisible hand. They said, we're not going to bring you on site. We're not going to have you talk, to everybody that we're talking to, but we want you to meet with us every week. Here's the challenges we're facing. What do you think? Here's a presentation we want to make. We want a review of that. And over a period of about 6 weeks, they ended up improving their credibility within the organization and their confidence such that it was really just polishing after that. They were learning reliability engineering, they were executing it, and they were really focusing on the bigger frameworks and guidelines, like derating guidelines and design for reliability manuals and teaching and stuff. And they were being asked to create those things. 6 months prior, they would have never taken it on because they weren't confident that they could. So part of our role in reliability is to find those other champions, so the people that want to be champions for reliability, and teach them what they need to know to be successful in that endeavor. It just strengthens our organization's capability to create reliable products. Plus, it's a lot of fun seeing other people be very successful by applying some of the advice you give them and provide to them and tailor to help them be successful. To me, that's the real leader, is enabling 20 other people to go on and become leaders in reliability. So you see a way to move forward? I'm not sure I left you with a detailed list, but hopefully a handful of concepts that would make it work. Bert, I should actually pull up and do a webinar on the multi-layer ceramics because there was a lot of good information I had way back then. I'd have to update it a little bit, but that might be a good topic for a future webinar. I know I have some articles on Accendo related to it, but I don't really, not enough, I would imagine, to make it a whole one. It's funny, these little capacitors, they get to the point where you can barely see them with the naked eye. That and my eyesight's getting older, I should say. Fraction of a penny each. Yet at one point I heard from a failure analysis lab that was working with all kinds of organizations across the country that it was about 1/3 of all product failures that they were alerted to dealt with capacitors. It was the capacitor itself was the problem. And so they were doing some deep dives into capacitors. But for such a simple, discrete component, it sure shows up in a lot of places. And I think it's by the sheer numbers and so many different types of applications that it really can mess your day up. if it's not controlled and consistent and designed well and all that good stuff. But we can certainly talk about it. All right. So I'm going to stay in the line. Any comments or questions and that kind of stuff? It's one of the benefits to attending it live. I'll try to answer your questions directly. It looks like multi-layer ceramic capacitors might be a topic for a future one. Probably the next one, since I was right at the start, I was asking for ideas for that. And Chris Jackson is not presenting in 2 weeks. He's presenting in May. They had a scheduling conflict, both last time and this time. So we're going to finally get to his presentation in late May. So hopefully that'll go well. And I'm going to wrap up the recording, but I'll stay on the line and see what else is going on in your world.